It's also surprisingly simple to think that, and amazing that more businesses don't do that. Why do you think they don't? I don't know. It's just logic. Treat your customers well, and they'll stay. That's what we did.
Welcome to the MindHack podcast, where we explore the psychology of self-improvement and mindset to help you live a happier and more fulfilled life. I'm your host, Cody McLain, and today we're talking with Jay Steinfeld. He is the founder and former CEO of Blinds.com, a company he launched from his garage in 1993, in which he would later sell to Home Depot in 2014 when it was selling $100 million worth of blinds and was considered by many to be one of the world's largest online companies selling window coverings. Jay is here with me today to discuss his journey as outlined in his book, Lead from the Core, The 4 Principles for Profit and Prosperity, which explores his key philosophies on leadership, innovation, and growth. His approach is not only about building a profitable business, but it's about fostering a culture of continuous improvement and ethical leadership that resonates deeply with anyone looking to make a meaningful impact. Jay's career includes his early roles as a CPA, vice president of finance, and entrepreneur in both brick and mortar and digital landscapes. A believer in rewiring, not retiring, he is now an entrepreneur in residence at Rice University, an advisor at UT Austin's Herb Keller Entrepreneurship Center, and the author of Lead from the Core, where he shares his 4 E's philosophy: evolve, experiment, express, and enjoy. Today, we'll delve into Jay's journey, his core leadership values, and his perspective on building a culture that drives success. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cody. That was great. Great to be here.
And so, Jay, you built Blinds.com, which behind me, I'm not sure if it's in the video, but I have blinds throughout my house, and you might not find such a great thing to know. I mean, they're Hunter Douglas shades. So I know that they were a competitor of yours. And I know that you started Blinds.com from your garage, and it became one of the world's largest online retail coverings. What do you believe was the fundamental mindset shift that allowed you to achieve this incredible growth?
The mindset shift. Well, I had a store, so I knew how to sell blinds. I didn't necessarily know how to scale a business. So I think the mind shift was about figuring out how to get other people to help me scale something and it not just be a sole proprietorship. So I hired 7 people, didn't know what I was doing, and eventually realized that I could do it a lot better with it, learning how to get the right people, have them motivated with the proper vision, show them how to execute, get them the right resources they needed, and really rely on other people more than relying on myself. That was probably the shift that made the biggest difference. But I must correct you on one thing. We are by far the #1 online retailer of blinds in the world.
In your book, you mentioned that you weren't at some point, but there's an aspect of kind of fake it till you make it.
Oh, well, at the beginning, we weren't the first online retailer of blinds. And this was in 93. And we said we were the world's largest, the #1 online retailer of blinds in the world because we were the only online retailer of blinds in the world. We did a lot of things at the beginning to make it seem a lot bigger than we were. We put ads from various large companies like Federal Express, Pro Flowers, and others. And those were banner ads that make it look like people were advertising on our site, even though those links went nowhere.
And I find as a fellow entrepreneur, especially when you start a business, you always have to puff up your chest and appear a little bit bigger than you are. Like I had an outsourcing company that eventually I scaled and we had 1,000 people. But if our first client knew that they were our first client, of course they wouldn't have signed up.
Well, we did all sorts of things. We had testimonials. we made up the testimonials and had people just impersonate other customers and had 2 or 3 of those. We then decided, that's probably not a good thing to do. So we just made fun of it. And we had Abraham Lincoln as a testimonial, Paul Bunyan, John F. Kennedy, and we had a real professional impersonator impersonate all these people. And it was all tongue in cheek. It was fun. We were really just trying to make buying blinds and shades a no-brainer and make it sort of irreverent. After the show Car Talk, I don't know if you or your viewers know that National Public Radio show about these 2 guys from MIT that are car mechanics, but brilliant and really funny. And that's what we wanted to do, is just make it look like we were having fun, because we were. And we knew what we were talking about, but not taking ourselves or the whole process too seriously.
Can you take me back to 1993? And I know that you started off as a brick and mortar store, and then eventually you transitioned to having an online digital e-commerce store. But did you always have this desire to be an entrepreneur? What led you to even starting this brick and mortar store in the first place?
Yes, I definitely always wanted to be an entrepreneur. In high school, junior high school, I had a custom t-shirt business that my friend and I, Gary and I, would design and sell all the teams their shirts. And so we always did that. And when I went into college, I said, I don't like accounting, but I believe that understanding finance and financial statements would be advantageous. So really all the successful business people said, you better understand financial statements. So I got an accounting degree, really hated everything about it, became a CPA, worked for KPMG for a couple of years, and then left. And the reason I went into business, even though I'd always wanted to do that, is I was fired from my business at MindHack Discount Mufflers. The company was sold. The next day I was out of there. So I needed something to do. My wife first started to run this drapery shop, and I thought, I'm a CPA. I should be able to sell draperies. I learned all about it from her and some others, and we opened up a second store, and that was in 1987 when that started. By 6 years later, I'd heard about something called the internet, the World Wide Web, and thought, I don't know what that is, but I've always been one who likes to experiment and try new things. So I just tried it, not to sell things, because at that time, Amazon hadn't even launched, and you weren't selling things online. That was unheard of. I had no vision as to what the internet was going to be or what I was going to be. It was really just a marketing experiment to see what would happen. So I got involved with that, and then Amazon launched and said, what the heck? You can sell stuff online. So I'm going to try to sell blinds. And of course, everybody told me that's the stupidest harebrained idea they'd ever heard of. The manufacturers like Hunter Douglas and the others, you mentioned Hunter Douglas before, said, no, you're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. We're not even going to sell to you. So all the manufacturers refused to sell to us at the beginning because they thought it was stupid. I mean, who was going to buy something online when, 1, they don't like to use their credit card online, 2, they can't even see the product, they can't touch the product, they have to measure themselves and even install it themselves. I mean, who's going to do that? Well, we tested it. We tried selling just some white and off-white blinds in 3 different categories. People started doing it, and they kept coming back, and eventually we got into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Hard to believe.
It is. And especially as you say, you ask who is likely going to order blinds and then have to install it themselves and they have to measure it themselves. And I seen that there was probably a period in which you had a high I'm not sure what your return policy was, especially if the issue was that the measurement from the customer was incorrect. So I'm wondering, how did you handle that? What were the biggest barriers that you saw in terms of having your customers order? Because you created a new platform for people to buy blinds. And I think the biggest issue, the biggest barrier is, of course, is it going to fit? Is it going to work?
Well, it was not too much of a problem because we knew that it could have been a problem, and we gave really good advice on how to do it. Very clear, good videos. I remember the first videos we did was me measuring and installing blinds in my bathroom. The videographer was the voiceover, and these were like 10-second videos. They're pretty stupid. I still have some of them. I think I've got some on my own website. They're hilarious to think that people would actually use that, but they did. And all it took was a few people, because it wasn't like I was betting my whole life on this venture. I still kept my drapery shop, and this was a side hustle. And it started in 93, but it wasn't until 8 years later in 2001 that I decided to sell the store and go full-time online. So I was taking orders out of my car in between appointments. I had my store, but we'd go to people's homes to sell the blinds and help them in their home as a shop-at-home decorator. In between going to homes, I would take these calls. They would call into the Laura's Drapery showroom, it's the name of the shop, and they say, all of our customer service representatives are busy. They'd then call me in my car. I'd pull off the side of the road. I used my big cell phone, had my order pad, price charts, everything right there on the front seat of my car. And for several years, that's how I answered the phone. It was just me returning calls from my car, pulling off the freeway. I remember the first time it was right in front of what is now Lakewood Church in Houston, where I live. At the time, it was the summit where the Houston Rockets played. But it was right on the freeway, right off the side, and eventually decided probably a good idea if I hired some people to answer the phone. 75% of the people in the company are customer service and salespeople. And all the engineers and marketing people that support them.
And of course, you had to do the customer support by yourself at the beginning. I deeply resonate with that. I would answer my own calls for so many years, and it doesn't matter where I was, I'd be answering the call. And sometimes you're dealing with a customer who's screaming at you because they're very upset with what you have to offer.
But I was used to that already. In fact, they were screaming at me right to my face. When I had a store and there was a customer that had a problem, I had to go to their house. So I was standing with the customer. That's harder than being on the phone. In the phone, you can at least put the phone down. You don't have to really listen. I mean, you can do things like that. Not that I did, but it's much harder to do this face to face. Now, it's actually easier to sell something face to face than over the phone, because they don't know if you really care, and you can show empathy. You can show your sympathy for their issue and solve it much quicker if you're right there face to face. So once you had that type of experience, then doing it over the phone was a different type of technique you had to learn, because before you could do it potentially with the empathy they felt from your physical presence. Now you had no physical presence. So you had to learn ways to show that by asking better questions and understanding what the real issue was and listening much more carefully on the phone. And so we taught everybody those techniques that we learned along the way as well. And that's why we became number one, is because the people weren't paid based on just selling blinds. They were paid based on whether they sold the right solution to people. And even the service people who were helping people when they had an issue, if they solved the issue properly, they were receiving more money than if they didn't. So the whole thing was based on quantity and quality. And by having the quality components in how people are getting paid, it provided the right incentive to do the right thing for customers. So customers always believed, not always, but most of the time, that we really did have their best interests at heart.
Yeah, that reminds me of so often that companies have policies, they have refund policies, they have ways of solving issues. And often something that I would certainly experience is the agent would say, deny a refund because it's over the 30-day money back guarantee. But then I would come in and look at the issue and see that we clearly screwed up on this client and he deserves all of his money back. And often the agents were not incentivized to actually provide, what's best for this person. And because they're just trying to do their job, which is to often just abide by the terms of service and what they've been trained. So is this part of the Kaizen idea of continuous improvement? How did you learn how to properly incentivize, say, your customer service agents to solve these issues, as well as even your sales agents, who commonly will sell something to anybody just to get their business, and then it backfires on you when you realize that they're not a right fit for your company?
I love that question. I hardly ever get that question, and it's a good one. We provided incentives for that. I mean, we paid people if they provided the wrong solution, they got dinged. So they had financial skin in the game when they did not provide the right solution. So how would we know that? We had a whole team of quality assurance people who would listen and record calls and would grade those calls and would know what the right solution was and whether they worked their way towards providing that. So they knew that, and we didn't listen to every call, but it was on a random basis. And people, the customer service people and the design consultants knew that they were going to be listened to, and it could impact their pay. So when you're impacting pay and you have a culture that really cares about people, I'm sure we'll get into some of that later, but we really cared about our people before we actually cared about our customers. We knew that if we treated our associates right, they would then treat our customers properly. So once you're in an environment where the idea is to think about how to make everybody around you better, including customers, vendors, everybody, then it's naturally going to happen. Plus, with that little financial kicker involved, that just ensured it.
So, how did you arrive at that mindset? Because often when you're building a business, you want to grow the business, you want to minimize your operational overhead, and you want to maximize your revenue coming in. And it is so incredibly difficult to have a mindset that would include things like throwing holiday parties. Or I know that you mentioned in your book that you had several employees during Hurricane Harvey that lost their homes, and you provided money so that they can stay in hotel rooms. So these things, they cost you more money up front, but in the long term, they tend to deliver. But it's so hard for a lot of entrepreneurs and operators to have this mindset. So where did that come from? And can you share some examples?
Well, you could also say that one of the things you're trying to do is to minimize your customer acquisition cost, your CAC. And if you want to do that, you have to get a very high incidence of repeat and referral business. The most profitable way you can grow is through referral and repeat business. You have people that already trust you. They're going to buy at a higher rate the second time because they've done it properly. They showed that you cared about them when you sold it to them. If there was an issue and you took care of it, they're going to be even more loyal to you because they don't expect you to take care of it the way we did and still do. So I think if you're just looking at it from a numbers perspective, know that the reason that most e-commerce companies fail is their customer acquisition cost is too high. They can never figure out how to increase their business that way. We always viewed the customer experience as the number one way to grow. And we knew that treating people right and then treating the customer right would increase that. It would also decrease hiring cost. It would decrease training cost because we could actually invest in people because we knew they would stay. A lot of companies will not invest in their employees because they know they're part-time or they're short-term, or they know they're just going to be there for a little while, then they're going to leave. I've got people there. I say I've got people. I haven't been in the business for 4 years, 5 years, since 2020. I still feel like it's still my business, even though it was sold to Home Depot in 2014, 10 years ago. It's still mine. I don't have the keys anymore, but I still feel like it's my business. But that's what you do. You just make sure that you treat people well, you invest in them with the right training, and customers are going to be more profitable to you and you're going to grow better. You're not going to necessarily grow as fast. It depends on the buying cycle too, because if people buy blinds every day, which they don't, you're going to grow faster. Here, the average turnaround was 7 years. So you had a little while before people were going to be coming back. Except a lot of people would just buy maybe one window, two, or just do one room, and they'd come back and do another room, or they'd then do the whole house. So you had some opportunities to grow, even with people who in a 7-year normal buying cycle. But that's what we did. We knew that growth would come best if we had the customer experience nailed, and to continue to evolve on that. Every time we saw some friction, every time we saw a bottleneck, that's what we would work on. The mission was to make buying blinds surprisingly easy. People don't expect it to be easy. They don't know the process for buying blinds. Our goal was to make it as easy as possible. So at the end of once they've bought it, they go, wow, that was amazing. And that's what, if you didn't have, that was called the GCC experience, Global Custom Commerce Experience. Blinds.com's corporate name was Global Custom Commerce. I won't go into that now, but the GCC experience is what we called it. So you not only sold something, you not only sold the right product, but you made them feel that they went to the right place. And even if they didn't buy when they were just looking at the beginning, if they felt like, I think I can buy from these guys, that was good enough on your first call, because you knew that would be a high likelihood of them coming back. So that was really it. It's also surprisingly simple to think that, and amazing that more businesses don't do that. Why do you think they don't? I don't know. It's just logic. Treat your customers well, and they'll stay. That's what we did.
I suppose we're in an era where there certainly are businesses that are very money dependent, or dependent more on new clients, and they don't really care as much about customer retention. But I guess it really just depends on the business model. But certainly the right way, the one that's going to have the least amount of controversy, the least negative impact on your reputation, and enable you to have the kind of growth that you have, is certainly this. And that's the right way to not only treat your customers well, but also your employees. And it sounds so simple. But yet it can be incredibly difficult when you're a client. I've had this so often, where I would have a client that I needed to refund them $10,000, and I knew, like, inside my gut, it was like the right thing to do. But then maybe I only had $15,000 in my bank account at the time. And so it's having to make these decisions that can impact your business, and it's doing the right thing. And so is that something that you learned over time, or did you always have this kind of gut intuition in terms of knowing what the right thing is, and then having the grit, the gut to do that?
I don't think I could ever say that I always knew that. That would be giving myself way too much credit. And I'm not saying that to be self-effacing. I really don't think I was like that. In fact, I was probably just the opposite. As a CPA, I was thinking the way to build a business was to cut costs, was to spend the least amount you can on anything so that you would make more money. Instead, I've actually discovered over just experience that being the most generous you can be is the way that you can actually make the most money. Now, within whatever makes sense in the long-term interests of the company, but generosity doesn't even have to necessarily be about money. Although you don't want to limit people's upside. And some businesses say, well, you can make this, but we're going to cap your compensation at this. If you sell too much, we're not going to give you any more. Why would you do that? Why not make everybody in the company tremendously rich, because they have made you rich by selling so much? Why stop them? That's a form of generosity. But I was talking about not necessarily meaning money when it has to generosity. It's about time. It's about attention, giving them the resources that they need, giving them proper instruction, proper direction, proper vision, being available when they have questions, giving them the ability to speak up. That's a form of generosity, not stifling open, vigorous, respectful debate. That's generosity. There's so many things. If you can think, what is the most I can do for my people and still have it make sense in the long-term best interest of the company? Switch it around like that, and I promise you, you will make more money than thinking the reverse.
There's Adam Grant's book called Give and Take, which really shows that principle, that those who give more to others tend to get more in reciprocity in return, rather than those who just take, who have a mindset of what's best for them. And it shows that's really what is one of the keys to success for sure.
I love reading books like that after I'd already kind of figured something out. And I read a lot, and I'd read everybody's book and try to figure out what resonated, what didn't. And I would just start doing things. And then somebody, a PhD or somebody from one of your earlier podcasts, maybe who really has done research on it and not just experienced it as empirical research, and says, well, here's the reason why this works. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know what the reason was. I just know it did work, and I'm going to keep doing it. And that's what a lot of people don't realize as well. Just try something. Just try something small. See what it does. If it didn't quite work, just tweak it a little bit. Maybe we'll start working. And then just keep doing it. And if it doesn't work, just stop. Simple stuff is how you build a big business. Just one customer at a time, one employee at a time, one transaction at a time. But ultimately, when you then start developing teams that can then replicate all the things that you've mentioned or enacted, it starts scaling right before your eyes. It's this autonomous excellence, this autonomous growth that just happens right before your eyes without your needing to be part of it at all. I remember one of the greatest times when I was walking around my office. At that time, there were maybe 3 floors. I think we had maybe 500 employees. And I was walking by and I looked in this room and saw maybe 5 or 6 people in some whiteboarding something. I didn't know any of the people in that room. I didn't even recognize them, which is maybe a flaw, but I didn't know who they were, but I knew they were having a good time because they were smiling, they were animated, they were doing some type of Pareto chart where they were looking at a prioritization of what they were going to do. And I just kind of watched it. And I still am getting that same feeling right now, just talking about it, thinking when I was watching it at the time. I can still perfectly envision it right now, vividly. It's just such a great feeling to see people doing things without your involvement. That was probably the biggest lesson I have, is get out of the way, let other people do stuff. It's not about empowering people to do stuff. It's about not disempowering people by getting in their way.
Yeah. And it's Stephen Covey has the notion that business goes much faster when you trust people. And it can also be very difficult to trust people that you hire. And I know you touched on this in the book, that sometimes you have to create constraints on them, because if they're in a position of power, they might abuse that and they might end up irreparably harming the company. So how did you foster this culture of trust, and how did you do that?
Well, I didn't do it at the beginning. And what I realized is, in order to delegate, you have to sort of test delegate. So you start giving people small things, and you don't just see if they do them well. You ask them questions. How did you think about doing this? And just follow up with them and say, what was your thinking? Why did you choose that alternative? Or why didn't you choose that? Or I see you pulled in Dixie for that job. Why did you think Dixie would be a good candidate? When you do that and you really are super interested in how people are thinking, you learn how they're thinking, you learn where their faults are, where their strengths are, and you can then know what to delegate and know what you need to train them to do so that you can continue to delegate more. And you give them opportunities by saying, what am I doing that you would like to do? What can I delegate to you that looks interesting to you? And when you ask that question to your people, they will start coming to you and taking a lot of stuff off your plate because they think it's fun. They think it's good. And that's how you do it. You just start small, listen to what they're doing so you understand how they think, not just whether they got the job done. And then you start learning who you can trust with bigger and bigger things. And at some point, you then just give them very big things. And then there's, of course, ways to check in on any project, which you do at the beginning, more at the beginning than at the end. And so I would sit in on meetings, maybe the first 2 or 3 on a big initiative, and then maybe get a week report, or then a month report, or then a bi-monthly report. But you make sure people are, and then of course the culture of experimenting and evolving being just imbued in everybody means that they're going to be watching what they're doing. They're going to want to improve. They're going to want to improve everybody around them. And if it's not working, you can trust that they're going to be seeing that it's not working and not be set on just doing something because that's what we all decided to do. It's not working. Stop doing that. And people would automatically do it because that was the culture. You can trust people when you have the right culture. You've got the right guidelines. You've got the right vision. You're looking at smaller tasks that have to be done that day or that week. And you check in on those types of things. And you sit in on meetings and just listen how they're directing people. You don't say anything. You just observe. Definitely don't say anything. Just listen. You can trust people when you see how they're running a meeting. You see how they're allowing their people to talk, to getting ideas, to fostering and encouraging discussion from their whole group, and not having some dogmatic statement that they say and that everybody goes, yep, that sounds great. And that's what they do. You want to get debate because they're the ones doing the work. They're closest to the customer. They're going to be able to figure out things that you would never know. So you have to listen. How do you not listen to other people? You don't want people just to check things off a list. If I tell somebody to pick up that quarter on the floor and they see $1, you want them to pick up the dollar, not just change the course, pick up the dollar.
And culture comes from the top, right? It comes from the founder, the leaders who create the example for others to follow. And I tend to see that if you're a leader and you're setting this culture, that your own foibles and your personality and perspective, they tend to ripple through the company culture. And I'm just wondering if there's any things that come to mind in terms of areas where you had to improve yourself that would then go on to have a positive impact on either the trust, the culture, the transparency of the employees and people around you.
Culture is not what you tell people you're doing, but is actually how you behave. So if I want people to improve and I'm not reading books and I'm not getting peer reviews and not doing 360 surveys, they're saying, well, you say you want to improve, but I don't see you doing anything to get better. And I did all those things. And sometimes I would just sit outside my office on a chair reading. And then is he working? Well, he's reading. And then I would tell people about the book that I was reading. So they knew I was wanting to learn. It wasn't even a question. And I was afraid I was going to get kicked out of my old company. And most CEOs don't scale. They're good at the initial level. They bring it up to a certain level and they don't know what to do after that. I was afraid that was going to happen to me. So I worked my butt off learning to find all the things that I wasn't good at and worked on that. And then once I realized I will never be good at, say, IT or a certain aspect of marketing, I realized, okay, I think I need to hire a C-level person here to do this because I will never be as good as this company needs. So that enabled us to all get better. And a rising tide. It happened in the company. Everybody got better. And if a person didn't get better at the same rate, if not faster than the rate we were growing, they would have to move to a different position or be moved out of the company. We all had to just get better. And that's what you do. I would get better. We had a big whiteboard that everybody would put on this whiteboard every week, things that they were working on to improve. And it wasn't just about what was happening in the company. It was what they were doing in their personal lives. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better driver. I want to learn how to fly a plane. I want to quit smoking. All that stuff would go on the whiteboard. People would see it. It would reinforce the idea that here at blinds.com, we just improve. That's what we do. That's the essence of who we are. I view this more of as a direct marketing company, and direct marketing companies always are tinkering and tweaking and trying to figure out A/B tests, multivariate tests, any way that they can figure out how to be more efficient with customers and spending less time doing something. So that's what we would always do. And it was fun. And most of the experiments we tried didn't work. What did we do? We set up this big test tube that showed all the experiments that did not work and put a marble at it if it didn't work. That was full. The ones that did work, we had another test tube, big These were like 5-foot tall test tubes, about 1.5 feet in diameter, and had marbles in that test tube. And that was maybe 20% full. And they were marked. Experiments that worked, experiments that didn't work. The ones that didn't work, full test tube. The other ones, hardly any. So we wanted to reinforce we are going to make mistakes, but we are going to experiment and we're going to figure it out. We'll all figure it out together.
So you created a system to try experiments within the company.
Yes. We had a whole process for how to submit experiments, how to rate the experiment, how to prioritize the experiment. And we had that was one of the keys, is setting up that from how to originate them, how to encourage people, and then how to then report out on what worked and what didn't work and make sure everybody knew what was working, what was not working. Letting the people know who actually made the original suggestion, who may not have had anything to do with that department. And you go back to them and say, hey, you came up with an experiment about 7 months ago. We finally did it and it's working and it's now increasing our business by $10 million. We did that with customers too. When customers gave us suggestions, we would get back to them and let them know, you gave us an experiment, we tried it, and it worked. Thank you. You've made the customer experience better for everybody as a result of your suggestion. We would also, one of the ways we would survey people after a sale is we would say, we didn't give this long survey, multiple choice, 1 to 10 and all that. We just said, what could we do to have made the experience better for you, for our product or service? That was it. It was open-ended. We did that from day one. And we had people, I think we had 3 people, all they did was answer those letters and would provide detailed, specific answers to any customer. We wouldn't just say, your input is very important to us, blah, blah, blah. We would say that idea and why we were late. You're right. We never should have done that. That was figuring out a way to disclose that better so that you know that was going to be late or whatever it is, and give them very specific answers. And they would love that. It was also a way to provide a fail-safe for when our normal process and procedure wasn't working. At least when they got that letter 30 days after their purchase, they had another opportunity to reach me. It went to me, although I had the 3 people respond with my name on behalf of me. Occasionally, if they felt I needed to respond, they would give it to me, but that was rare. All those things were just allowing people to speak up and respond in a way that made it better for them.
When you're a leader in a large organization, one of the most difficult components is the communication, right? It's the communication up the ladder from a person who's doing customer service, because they have a manager and then you have a department head. And so all of those issues, the main issues, you're relying on your people to bring those issues if it's above their ability to improve or change. And establishing this communication link with the customers and your employees can be one of the hardest things to do as a leader. And I know even in Kaizen philosophy and the original book that I read, they talk about the Toyota production line and how they would try to incentivize employees to speak up when there was an issue with the car. And none of the employees wanted to push the button to stop the entire production line because they were afraid they were going to get in trouble with their managers. And so what were the primary philosophies or thoughts or systems? Maybe it was EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. How did you try to solve this communication so that you would get these things that are necessary escalated to you, either from the customer or primarily your department heads?
Well, it wasn't necessarily needed that they would escalate it to me. They needed to escalate it to somebody who would take action. If everything needed to go to me, that's a bottleneck. So I never wanted to make it where people had to go directly to me, because I would never be able to handle.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. It seems very minor, but we had all hands meetings every week on Thursdays from 2 to 2:15. So that we lengthened it to 2 to 2:30. And people would just ask questions. There was a new employee. I think she had been there about a week. And during it was called Say Jay, because Jay, my name, I would just say things and get input from people. We would let people know about what's coming up so they would feel safe, because you never want to surprise people. So they feel fearful of their job, fearful of what am I doing? Why am I doing this? You never want people to feel like that. But we would tell people at the beginning in training, in the first week of training, about our 4 E's, about evolving, experimenting, expressing yourself, and having fun, enjoying yourself. And this was one woman in Say Jay said, Jay, you just said something, but my understanding is, and she went into this thing where she was questioning what I was saying in front of hundreds of employees, and she'd only been there 2 weeks. Now that's exceptional. Most people would not do that. She did. So what did I do? I didn't answer her question right away. I first said, we all need to stand up and give her applause for having the guts to speak up and live one of our 4 core values of expressing yourself. And that's what they did. And that tells people you can debate the CEO in front of the entire organization. And if you can do that, then you can certainly speak up to anyone else. So that's just a small little example of what you do. You just listen when people have things they want to tell you, hear it, and respond in a thoughtful, sympathetic, open way, and do something about it. If you're not, tell them, well, we're not going to do that because while it's a good idea, we don't have time for it, or we don't have the resources to do it, or we're doing something else right now. We'll put it on the list, and hopefully we'll get to that maybe in Q4 or whatever. And maybe we won't, but at least you hear the idea, put it on the list, and prioritize it. In that, what I was saying earlier, we did have a whole way of prioritizing ideas and suggestions.
Yeah. And one of the hardest things I see as a leader is trying to convince your organization that it's okay to bring up issues or concerns or problems that they see, and not being afraid to speak up, even if they feel like that their own manager is not doing a proper job at resolving that.
Well, that's a trickier one, for sure. But when there was a new employee that was coming into a meeting, one of the things I would do is we'd go through this meeting, and I realized that Cody's not saying anything. I haven't heard anything from Cody this whole meeting. So after the meeting, I'd say, hey, Cody, you'll come over here, and not sit down behind a desk or anything, and just say, I didn't hear any input from you. You never said anything. And I know you're smart. And I hired you because of your background in this, and you've got a unique perspective about this. And why were you there? Why should you be there if you're not going to speak up? So I really am asking you, I know you're new, but please, I need to hear from you next time in these meetings. And that was it, 5 minutes, and then they'd speak up. So you just have to be real with it and let people know if they're not exhibiting the behaviors you want. You need to let them know right away. You can't wait. You don't wait till the end of the year and they're in a performance review. You don't even care about that kind of stuff. You just want to let people know this is what the expectation is. You didn't do it. This is what you need to do.
Yeah. And of course, never criticize them in front of others.
Yeah. So I'm sure I could come up with all sorts of other ways of doing it, but it's even in our own meetings, if in our senior leadership team meetings where it could be 6 people, they would see the behavior that I'm exhibiting by listening to people. We say, okay, so we're going to talk about this event, this particular initiative. What does everybody think? I would make sure that I would not say anything until everybody else spoke, because I didn't want to say something and then influence them as to how they were thinking, because it's too easy to hear what your boss is saying and just do that. I don't want people to do that. I want people to do what they think would be the best solution. I may come up with another idea, and ultimately it's my call, but chances are they're going to come up with better ideas than I would. And I want to hear them, and I don't want to influence it so they wouldn't think of something that I wouldn't have done had I not allowed them to speak first. So stuff like that.
So I know when it comes to executive positions, it's different in terms of the expectation of the value that you're going to derive from this employee as a business. And I know one of the biggest issues I've seen is if you have a large customer service team, is that some of them will have really great ideas, but a lot of them either they don't care enough, they're just there from 9 to 5 to do their job. And it seems maybe 1 out of every 10 hires might be a go getter, somebody who actually finds an interest in the job and actually wants to contribute and make a positive contribution to your organization. And those people are the ones that you have to find and you have to nurture and promote from within. How did you either find these types of go-getter people, and how did you to kind of promote them so that you can create this culture of continuous improvement?
We expected everybody to be a go-getter. I would say our percentages were just the universe. Maybe 9 out of 10 were go-getters and one wasn't. And that one would be probably ostracized from the company in a matter of weeks because you can tell the people who are open to change. You can tell the people who are either arrogant or obstinate or feel like they know it all. And those are the people that will absolutely do the worst in your company. You need people who are not only open to change, but relish change. And we would interview for that trait. We would ask people about continuous improvement or evolving. Tell me, Cody, something you've done or that you're doing right now to improve yourself. And it can't be about business. It has to be just something in your personal life. If they couldn't answer that question, they were not hired. They had to demonstrate that they are the kind of person who wants to get better and will take action to get better. Those are the people we hired. We wanted people who are willing to experiment. In the interview, behavioral question might be something like, well, give me an idea of the time in your life when you just did something spontaneously and took some risk in doing it. And I remember one person said, well, right out of college, my friend and I, we went to Vietnam with just a backpack and we each had $50. And we were going to go for a month. We had no idea how we were going to make money. And we weren't even sure where we were going to go, but we knew we would be able to do it. Great answer. That's the kind of person we wanted. Person who is taking pilot lessons, trying to do new things, willing to take chances, loves that, relished it, loves ambiguity, doesn't just accept it. Those are the people we hired. We looked for that. So I guess my thought for anyone listening now is, what are the core things that matter to you? Just because those were the 4 things that matter to me doesn't mean that they're going to resonate with someone else. I think it actually should, but maybe they don't. And whatever those are, interview to make sure that you're getting people right from the start that they have those traits, those characteristics, because you can't teach that. They have to have it imbued into them right from the start. And once you have people that have the kinds of things, personality, behaviors that you want, those are the people you keep. Those are the people who are most likely going to improve with your organization. It could be that it's just the opposite. You don't want people to experiment. You want people who are just compliance people for a certain, maybe you're running a nuclear reactor and you don't want them experimenting with the nuclear reactor. You want them to follow the book exactly. And if they have a question, they come to you and then maybe you put your sciences on that, but you don't want experimentation there. So there you're going to be hired for people who are very good at compliance and follow orders absolutely precisely. So figure out what it is that makes sense, what resonates, what's important to you, and hire people that have those personality traits already and not look to change them once they come on.
Right. And having that sense of curiosity is so incredibly important, not just for the people around you, but as well as yourself. And in your book, you mentioned several books that really seem to help you. And I happen to have already read many of those books. And what strikes me is some of those books, like the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, that's like this narrative of this pretend company having these issues. is I remember reading that book when I was having issues with my executive team, and we were kind of fighting. We had different ideas about what we should do. I had an advisor that would advise, but I remember reading this book and then bringing like, okay, we all need to read this book. Like, let's kind of read it together. And then that started to help. And it's also difficult because sometimes you get people who don't want to read or don't want to try to learn something themselves so that they can become a better person who's able to contribute more to the conversation instead of just being somebody who digs into their own core beliefs. So I loved having situations where an issue would come up and then I would read a book about it, and then I'd be able to come back to the company, contribute something meaningful, and we would be able to move that along. So I think it's brilliant that you're able to have that and find people around you as well to help you lead this company. And when you're going through all these transitions, you're coming from this small brick and mortar entrepreneur to now leading this relatively huge company with making millions and millions of dollars. What was it that enabled you to learn the importance of culture, the importance of treating your relationship, your customers right? Was it just trial and error? Was it reading when an issue came up and you read a bunch of books on it? Did you have mentors or advisors that you seek and brought on, or a mix of all of them?
Well, you can't just say it was one, but all those things obviously had influence. But the core value you mentioned, I think the gist of it was about core values. And I didn't know anything about core values. I didn't read about core values or culture or happiness or and anything like that. It was unfortunately a couple of years after I started the business, my wife died of breast cancer. And that was a shock to my system. And at that time, I maybe had 10 employees, 15, maybe, I can't remember exactly. But I had to figure out for myself what makes me tick. And I became very introspective. And naturally, being a reader, started reading about happiness and all the different things that people could do to understand themselves and understand the direction, vision that you might want for your life, your destiny, how much control you have over things, how much control do you have over your own happiness. And I just read everything I could possibly read about that. And eventually started figuring out what my core values are. And the first two were not even close. And I thought they
Yeah.
were, and people would say, that's not you. What are you talking about? That may be something you want to be, but you're not. So I said, okay, I need to be really better at understanding who I am, and would talk to people who knew me and wouldn't be afraid of speaking up. And realize that speaking up was one of those things, and evolving
Mm.
was one of the things, and experimenting was. And I always liked being a little irreverent and having fun and not taking myself too seriously. I mean, taking everything we did very seriously, but not too seriously that if it didn't work, it's okay. We'll figure it out. So to have fun, enjoy the ride. But that's what it came to. And one of the core values, there was a fifth, that was to help people become better than what they ever believed possible. Well, that's good, but it was so good that it became actually the whole vision of the company. Well, not the vision, the mission of the company, the purpose, to help people become better than what they ever believed possible. And everybody knew that my job as a leader was to help them get better and to help them be able to help somebody else get better. And when you have an organization where everybody in the organization is helping everybody else get better, well, that is a pretty beautiful thing. That's pretty amazing. And when the people from Home Depot came in and Lowe's was in there for a while and Hunter Douglas, and people would come in and look at the company, they go, you guys are happy. How are you? Why is everybody so happy? A lot of people who would come in as new employees would see this when they first came in and they were interviewing, and they thought it was like a play. They thought we were just acting, and that certainly the company can't possibly really be like this. And then I can't even think how many people there were that would say, I thought this was like a ruse. I thought this is just what you do when you're trying to hire people, but you're really like this. And that's how you keep people. That's how you get the highest performance possible.
I know at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that we were talking about like the ideal is that we want people to be the best version of themselves. And even if that means that they leave our company and take the knowledge that they've learned working with us and they start their own company. And I believe you were talking about somebody that came to mind that did just that.
Well, there were scores of people who did that. There's, I mean, I could mention them all by name. I won't. But there's a lot of people who ended up starting their own companies or co-founding companies. One of them started a company a few years ago. It's now just a few years ago. And I think he's raised 600 million and has about a 1.3 or $1.4 billion valuation. He started off in my accounting department as a cost accountant and worked his way up to being CFO, COO, and then worked his way out of the company. And I remember you do one-to-ones where you're every month with your top people. A one-to-one is where you just listen to what they want to talk about. They set the agenda and you help them grow. That's the purpose. It's really more for development than to looking at initiatives and determining the status of initiative. You have other meetings for that. One-to-one's about people growing. And sometimes they'd say, you know, what I want to do is not work here in 5 years. I want to have my own company. And some people would say, what? This person doesn't want to stay? I'm going to fire them. They don't want to be here. No, what you do is you say, well, if you really want to get there, you're going to have a greater time doing that, staying here, because we're going to help you get better. That one person that we were talking about, he had a, let's just call it not an advantageous trait where he wasn't really relying on other people and was just kind of faking it. And I asked him once, do you really care about your people? Or was what you just did an act? And he looked at me and he went, huh. And right after that, his effect in the company and his growth, I mean, he'd already been CFO, so he had already grown really well. But if he was going to be a CEO someplace, he had to make sure that people knew that he really cared about them and was going to help them develop. And from that moment on, he just really grew, eventually left not that long after that and started. And there's many, many others who would tell me that they're going to leave. In fact, they'd say, I'm leaving next year. I say, okay, let's see what we can do. Is you need to work on this, this, and this. And in the meantime, they would work harder because they knew they could tell me that they wanted to leave. And they usually end up staying 2 or 3 or 4 years. I remember one guy who was in our QA department in IT. He said he was planning on being there for about 2 years. He was there 15 years because he was growing all the time. Those are the successful situations for a CEO. When your people grow, when your people perform beyond their own expectations, that's when you know you're successful. That's when you could look back and say, man, I made a difference. I didn't just have this company and made money, which is great. And I'm not going to minimize that. That was super great. I loved it. But really, the visceral things, the success that you get by seeing your people grow, there's nothing like that. It's really not the same, but it's like when you see your kids grow and they graduate from college, they get a great job, they're now living the life they want, and you can sit back and go, yeah, he's doing great. I did my job as a parent. He doesn't need me. He'll talk to me, and he's having a great life. That's what you want with your employees as well. It's not exactly the same. I know that, but it's directionally the same.
Did you have any fears in terms of, so typically your best employees and your best executive people, as they grow, their self-confidence improves. And then they start to question, obviously, as you just said, what's a better, bigger opportunity for me? And they might leave you in a situation in which you then have to find somebody else. Some of them are so fearful to even say, depending on the company cultures, that they're afraid to tell you that they're leaving, and you might just get like a 1-week notice. And often you have people who are pivotal to the operations of your company. So really, I guess it really just all comes back to cultures, is even if somebody perhaps has a higher paying opportunity somewhere else, that perhaps they want to stick around because the culture, the people, they enjoyed what they're doing. But that seems to be a really difficult thing to balance since everybody's always looking for a better opportunity, one that you might not be able to offer.
Well, we were always competing with Exxon and in Houston. You've got big oil companies and engineer companies. We could never pay what they were paying. So we always had to provide more than just financial. Now, you can't ridiculously underpay people, but if they felt like they were growing, they would ultimately have a greater opportunity in the future being with you, and they were becoming better people, not just having a good job, but they felt significant, consequential. They felt like they were making a difference in the company and in the customers' lives, that what they were building mattered, that people were using what they were building. That's a lot. Having autonomy and having a real purpose is something that it's hard to financially quantify, but it's a real thing. And now, I'm not saying that we didn't lose people over money from time to time. If somebody's going to double person salary or 50% more, take it. If you can get it, do it. Now, you may hate the job, but if that's what you need, a lot of people would take jobs like that and realize they hated it and they'd come back. And say, I tried it. It's fine. We'll take you back. No hard feelings. You were good. If I were you, I would have taken that opportunity too. You didn't like it, you're welcome to come back. We never worried about that. And I'm not saying that people did not give us notice from time to time. I remember somebody who came in the morning and they went to lunch and never came back. That was it. They were there a half a day. It's like, how do people do that? Can't you just say, this is not for me, I'm leaving? No, they just ghosted us. So it happens.
And on the flip side of that, you obviously encountered employees or department heads that were not meeting your expectations. And so how did you measure that, as well as in some cases, at least for me, I would have like attachment issues, and it would be hard to let them go, even if I felt like in my gut that something's not working here. And I know what you have to do is you have to be willing to face them. You have to be willing to question them. So how did you know or have the conscious awareness to see that somebody's not working for this position? Maybe their personality's off, but maybe they're meeting the metrics. So I assume you set KPIs. How did you decide to let somebody go if you felt like they weren't working?
Well, that's a complex. It's an easy question. It's a complex answer. I'll try to make it as short as possible. And this just the things that I would think of when that happened. The first is, was it my fault that they did I hire the wrong person? Did I not provide the right resources? Did I not provide the right direction? Did I not have put them on the right team? Is the system broken and it's not them? Would anybody in that situation have failed? So the first thing you have to decide is what role did you have in that failure? And is it a systematic problem, a systemic problem, or is it that person just not following the process? Once you realize it's still the person, then you realize, well, are they living the core values, but just not being able to do that job? So maybe they're not really good at managing projects. Maybe they're just not good at that type of keeping the trains on time. Maybe they're better of a visionary job or something more abstract. So if they're living in the core values, then you try to find another place for them where they would succeed. People moved around in the company all the time. And a lot of people would speak up and say, I know I'm in accounting, but I want to be in project management. I want to be in marketing. People moved completely into different departments asking to do that. And we wouldn't necessarily say yes, but we would provide that opportunity. So knowing that people had the opportunity to move around, that was good. If they didn't live the core values, that's a whole other story. If they're not doing well, they don't have the right core values, we made a mistake, they're wrong. That's it. They're wrong. And even if their performance is good, if they're not living the core values, I remember the second best design consultant that's in sales, heard her yell at a customer. And then we talked to her, and it happened again. She was gone. You can't, that just, and she was a great salesperson, but we couldn't keep her because then everybody else would see that that behavior was being accepted. And it can't be. Not when you're trying to continue to get customers back, not yell at them and get them to go away. So it really depends on what's the issue. Was it your fault? Was it their fault? And then are they living the core values? So you go through this decision tree on how you make a decision as to where they go. And maybe just putting them in a different seat on the bus is going to be better for everybody. There's a person, we have people from Home Depot. I don't know, there's probably 400,000 or 500,000 people at Home Depot would come to work for us with 500 people because they just liked it. And one of the people who I remember, I'm not going to mention his name, but the person who I reported to there said, "So you're going to hire him? Really?" And then he turned out to be brilliant. And I remember a few years later, he goes, "You saw something in him that we never saw." I said, "No, we just put him in the right role and he flourished. He was not in the right role with you. And we understood what he could do and put him there. And he's still there and he's doing amazing. He's one of the best employees we've ever had. And at Home Depot, he was good, but made some waves, not in the right seat."
That's the Jim Rohn quote, right? That you have to, first challenge is getting the right people on the bus, and then the second is putting out them in the right seat.
Yep.
And so earlier you mentioned that after you had started your business, that your wife unfortunately died of breast cancer. And I can only imagine that while you're at the beginning of starting this business, that's an incredibly deep pain that is hard to deal with. How did that affect you with the business? Did you, so let me just share before you answer, is that where I come from is that both my parents died before I turned 18. And in fact, I wrote a book called From Foster Care to Millionaire, and I was partly in foster care while running my business. And I remember that the night that my mom died, I watched a movie, and then I went on my computer, and then I started answering customer support tickets. And it was maybe 10 years after that, once I realized that I had actually I'd become a workaholic as a form of self-therapy. And I don't know if that's healthy or not, but it got me through, some of the worst parts of my life. And so I guess in some ways I'm asking you, how did that affect your, and obviously you became successful, but how did it affect you mentally?
I asked myself that question a lot, and I get asked that question, and I'm not quite sure. I know I wasn't myself. I don't think anybody is themselves when they're under that kind of stress. My mother died when she was 46, and my wife was 47 when she died, both of cancer. So I was, I kind of had the shock into my system that the most important women in my life died at an early age of cancer. So I was kind of used to low expectations and knowing I need to hustle. I think what it did is it just reinforced for me the fragility of time, the essence of let's just get to work. Let's just do it. Let's not think about it. Let's just start. We'll figure it out. And that probably was the greatest lesson for me. Whether I was a workaholic or not, or whether I was temperamental or difficult, probably maybe if you ask some of the people who are still working there how I was at that time, they could give you a better answer. My kids certainly could give you a good answer on that. They weren't particularly pleased either in my behavior at that time, but we're in a good place now, and my kids are in a great place, and it's fantastic to see where they are, where I am now, being able to give back, doing podcasts, writing book, helping entrepreneurs succeed, investing in a lot of scores of startup. Not that I'm looking for a lot of investments. I've got a lot already, but it's just a really gratifying place to be able to start helping other people learn what took me years to learn. And that's what I think you'll get out of the Lead from the Core. Just that whole trajectory of going from working out of selling out of your car to being part of a $150 billion business and working there. After selling the company in 2014, I stayed with Home Depot and worked on the online leadership team there for 7 years. I didn't have to stay. I just enjoyed it, and I was able to, evolve, experiment, express myself, and have fun, and work on the vision that we had at blinds.com. And being part of Home Depot made it much more likely to happen. And it's happened. And when I saw that was happening, that was when it was time to leave. Okay, I've done it. There's a good successor for me. I know what my next gig is going to be, helping people, getting on boards. Time to go. And the core values I knew were embedded into all the people. And still now, if I go back in there or I look on LinkedIn or see these articles that are written about, those core values are still there. And what's amazing is that even being part of Home Depot, who has great core values too, but they've got their core values. They've got their values wheel that was started by Bertie Marcus and Arthur Blank back in the day. And I remember Home Depot said, well, you're now part of Home Depot. These 8 values are what you will have now. And I said, no, they won't. We will respect those, but we have 4 core values that have made us how we are, and we're going to stick to that. We will respect Home Depot's and believe it's great, but that's not a core value is what causes you to behave in a certain way. If your core value is to experiment, that means you experiment. Something about trusting, I don't even know what they are. Sure, shareholder value. Well, that's not really a core value for us. Our core value is not about delivering shareholder value. It was about being a great company for great people and giving them value, and ultimately we would get great shareholder value. But it wasn't a core value. It wasn't what motivated us. It wasn't like we got up in the morning and said, today we're going to really deliver shareholder value. They're a public company, so you have to do that as a public company, but that wasn't us. That was never us. So what we did is we took their 8 core values and created the wheel of those in the circle, and then put our 4 core values in the middle. And I handed it back to the HR department and said, okay, we respect your core values, but at the core, the nucleus of your 8 are our 4 in the middle. So we gave them a hybrid version of everything. That way we would not disrespect. Home Depot is an amazing company, but we come at it from a different way. Their operational efficiency were about customer intimacy, and that's just a different approach. Ultimately, we both have outstanding financial results, but just starting at it from a different perspective, which is another thing we were able to do, is to keep those core values despite being part of this monolithic giant company. Normally, the life gets sucked out of you when you sell your company to a big company. That didn't happen.
Right. And the majority of acquisitions end up failing since there is often a huge mishmash between the cultures that the executives don't really seem to ask or bother with, since they're mostly focused on the numbers and whether it makes sense to the company. So I think that's great. I think that the lesson for any aspiring founder is to make sure that the core values that you embody into the company while you're running it can stay with the company even after an acquisition, which I know isn't always in your fervor.
But I will say, you better make your numbers. You can talk about core values all the time, but it's table stakes. You have to make your numbers. So there's all this enlightened leadership discussion that we're talking about. It makes sense, but if it doesn't translate into financial performance where you're hitting your numbers, doesn't matter. You're going to have to change.
Yep.
So, but we were hitting our numbers. We were surpassing our numbers. So why change it?
When you ended up selling it to Home Depot, did you ever have any kind of identity crisis? As I know, I and many other founders, where you exit and then you realize that you basically just you have this baby and you just gave it to somebody else. How did you deal with that emotionally when you sold this company?
If they give you enough money, it doesn't really, all that stuff doesn't really, it actually is part of the truth. But I had a board of directors, I had investors, and eventually after about 11 or 12 years into it, I took some institutional money. So I had institutional investors. So I was already used to reporting up and dealing with different types of people at those levels. So I'll just leave it at that, different types of people. And once you've got that experience of dealing with outside investors, institutional investors, boards of directors, smart board people, you learn how to do that. And that was great experience for me, because once I became part of Home Depot, all the things that I had learned over many years were applicable there. One was hit your numbers, but understand what they want, what they need, what are their objectives, and make sure that you're listening to their objectives so that you can provide what they want, what they need, while still making sure that you are attending to your own business and living your own vision and getting the right people. So if they wanted to change my compensation program, which they did, nope, not doing that. So I was able to speak up. But because we were new, I also, one thing I will say, there's a whole section in the book on this. When Pixar sold to Disney, Ed Catmull, the CEO then, I'm not sure he's still the CEO, I think he is, came up with a sort of rules of engagement, like, okay, we'll sell to you, but we're going to stay in our existing location. We're going to keep our compensation the way it is. We're going to have our same titles. So we did all that. And I came up with that same type of list and got them to sign off on, yes, we will allow you to continue being a certain way. Now, it was not binding. It was just directional, but it was signed by the legal department saying, yeah. So at least every time I got a new boss, I could pull out that letter and say, this is what they said. And they go, what? Okay. And we were able to keep our autonomy. For the first 4 years after the sale, they didn't even put their own CFO in. My
Wow.
CFO was reporting to me, not to them. The HR department reported to me, not to the HR department at Home Depot. After, I don't know, 5 years maybe, they said, it's probably better corporate governance if your finance department reported into ours, with a dotted line to me. And that worked out fine. It was a little confusing for them to have two bosses, but it was fine. That's what I would have done too.
And so, as you say, focus on the numbers, because the numbers need to be there. But what supports the numbers and the people is the culture. And without the culture, you won't have the numbers that you're seeking. I know that we're out of time, so I want to encourage anybody who's listened that if you're building a business or you're in the process of it, Lead with the Core. It was a fantastic read, and there's so many important points that we weren't able to cover today. But I really love how you distilled so many concepts into the 4 E's: evolve, experiment, express, and enjoy. So with that said, thank you, Jay, for the contributions that you're making to other entrepreneurs, as well as the book and the people that you've positively affected.
Cody, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.